Alright guys, so we are going to start off today. We have our few announcements. Remember, the term paper is due on May 12th. It's going to be at 11:59 p.m. So you have pretty much the whole day to do it on that day. Remember, you turn it into me on paper, and you're also going to turn it into me via turnitin.com. Okay?
It's due that day.
It is due that day, but at night. Okay? So you will have all day to do it. Remember, I will proofread your paper. Alright? We do as much as possible until you can. I would wait until the last. I would say until you get 4 pages of that term paper. Okay, that way I have an idea of what you have on the paper. You have pretty much in whole all written. That way there won't be any surprises when I grade. So today we are going to be speaking about Johnson's Great Society. Today, yes.
For the term paper, does works cited count as like a page?
No, but I wanted, if you're having concerns about, like, it's not going to be long enough, come talk to me. We might be able to work something out. Because, again, if it's really good, I'll be okay. Yes?
Are we allowed to use Arial font, or do you want to...
No. Only Times New Roman. And remember, everything's going to be on Google Classroom for us, okay? So do not worry.
MLA.
Absolutely. Okay, so going back. So Johnson and the Great Society. Remember, yesterday we were speaking about... the other day we were speaking about the Civil Rights Movement, and we were also speaking about JFK, okay? John F. Kennedy and Johnson were both presidents during the Civil Rights era, all right? And during the Civil Rights era, there were so many other facets happening. There were so many other things happening in the United States along with the Civil Rights Movement. And it's like this different, there were so many dynamics happening. At this point, a lot of Americans were concerned about so many different issues. So you have issue 1, you have basically, even better, you have domestic issues, and you had international issues, okay? And the United States had policies regarding both of these. They had foreign policy and you had domestic policy. You had also all of these different events happening at this time. So domestically, we had the Civil Rights Movement. So the Civil Rights Movement was happening throughout the 1960s. Not only that, you have the Cold War, right, in which extended into the international realm, okay? And you also have society, you have societal change, okay? This society change is absolutely revolutionary. Like, the society change was, remember, this is what really was hitting home. Remember, civil rights is also a society change, but again, we keep it as 2 separate. We're keeping it separate. Does anybody want to know why, or does anybody know why we have this separately? Why we have civil rights separate as opposed to society change? Yes, Jeremiah.
The society wasn't ready for it?
Okay, I like that. Yes.
Because civil rights was mainly for that one group, and not everybody else changed for that one group.
Beautiful. Yes.
So a lot of society changes have occurred before without civil rights actually changing.
Beautiful. I love all of those answers. I would say the most correct would be Colin, because again, I'm using most correct because there's no definite answer. Civil rights during this time, right, they separated in the book because this was mass change. You have its government, its society, and also you could almost go into psychological. It's like the whole, like, across the board. Whereas society change during this time is people opening up, like America opening up to outside the box. Remember, during the 1950s, you had one-way thinking, correct? Remember, women stayed in the homes, you always went to church, people dressed the same. Now in the 1960s, people are breaking free of that mold and they're pretty much doing what they want, right? The hippie movement, correct? All right. So this is what we have domestically. Internationally, we have the Cold War. Russia, if you remember from world history, Russia is now dominating that era. 1960s, a lot of African states are declaring independence. The world, what I would note in your notes, make sure this is the big headline, is that uncertain times. The 1960s are uncertain because everything is changing. All right? So uncertain times. Now, moving from Great Society, remember JFK died, all right? What year did JFK die, Katie? Yes. Kiki, what year did JFK die?
1963.
Beautiful. Thomas, what year did JFK die? Beautiful. All right. So he died in 1963. Remember, how long was he in presidency?
3 years.
3 years, right? He wasn't able to get much done. Okay, in 3 years, not much can get done at all. He proposed domestic change and he proposed international change, but none of this ever got done. It was left to LBJ. Remember, Lyndon B. Johnson came from Texas. He is a Southerner. Okay, he understood the Southern dynamic. He understood that the South isn't going just to change. They're not going to go wake up one day and not be racist. He knows that it's going to be a slow process. So he proposes this idea called Great Society. And this is a domestic issue that goes into, not an issue, but domestic change that goes into international. Okay? So, let me erase this. So we have all of these different issues going on during the 1960s, not to mention the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War also starts, which would be an international change. I didn't add that there, but it is an international change. But what happens is we have Great Society. I want you to imagine being LBJ at this time. Not only is he dealing with domestic issues such as civil rights, not only is he dealing with the South is being unruly, they are not accepting civil rights, you're also dealing with the death of a president. The country still hasn't been able to recuperate from that. Now you have to add on another war the United States is now getting into. That's a lot of pressure. No other president really had to deal with all of this. LBJ is ruling or being a president in a new age where everything is dictated by international circumstances and also his new laws, like laws that are being made by the Senate. There's tons of laws that are being made. So LBJ was able to come to power. He started off small, and he basically becomes vice president. But he does this, and this truly is a testament to the American dream, like in the 1950s. And this is why he really caught the American public, and he was reelected after serving the remainder of JFK's reign. So what Johnson did is that he just continued JFK's policies. He really didn't make too much more. All right? He didn't add more to it. He wanted to help he wanted to help average Americans. Okay? He wanted to make sure that all Americans had a place to live. He wanted to help veterans. He wanted to help African Americans. He wanted to help everybody. He really wasn't too biased. But he knew that there is a double-edged sword because he knew that the South wasn't cooperating. He knew that not all the states would cooperate. And one of his big issues was the war on poverty. Okay? He did not like the idea of people being poor. Okay? He really didn't like the idea of people being poor. And what you do need to write down, again, next to Great Society, this is not a law, but this is an act. So this is an act made by Lyndon B. Johnson. And what also is created during this time is the Civil, and you need to have this down, Civil Rights Act of 1964. Civil Rights Act of 1964. All right, so this one act ended segregation. Remember, what's really, really powerful about this is that this one era, like this one act ended segregation. It was ended by a Southerner. So again, it was created, this was something that JFK was going to do, but he was killed before he was able to do it. LBJ was able to make this happen. Now, do you think that all of America was on board with this at this time? Sydney, what do you think? Do you think America was on board with this idea? No. Why do you think? You can always pass off to a friend. Austin, what do you think?
Because they weren't ready for change.
You weren't ready for change. Again, the government was ready, correct? LBJ was, but do you think the South was ready?
No.
You just don't wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm ready for change, or you know what, I see that person the same as I do. So remember, LBJ was ready for the change, but probably not the rest of America.
Do you think he was trying to force it on them?
I think so. That's actually a really good idea too, because if you think about it, you know, like when you have those, like, you're always watching, like, you'll watch little kids. Has anybody babysitted before? Like, you babysit people, and like, obviously they're little kids and they don't understand why you do something or why they have to go to bed or why they have to eat, which doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, like when you watch it, so you force them to do something or you force them like to go to bed.
Because it's for their own good.
It's for their own good. I think that's what LBJ was doing. Like he knew, like he's gonna force it. Like the Southerners were being childish, right?
Mhm.
Like they weren't seeing the greater picture. So I think he forced it on them. And I think that was. Do you think that was good for him? Like now thinking about it, do you think that was a good thing for LBJ to do?
Mhm.
Why? So I see you shaking your head, Justin. Why do you think so?
He's about the community of America together.
Right,
They
eventually.
want one person.
Right. So it eventually got there, right? So we eventually do have equal rights. Now, why do you think? Why am I doing this?
Because people are still racist.
Separate but equal.
Separate, like kind of like what you're saying. Like kind of like we're not truly equal, are we?
No.
No, we still have equality,
yeah,
right?
this is
Well, I
claim
feel like
as-
yeah.
People still see
Wait, hold up. What were you saying, Katie?
I was saying that they claim that we're equal, but obviously we're all treated different.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I think it was like the
Different
example.
ethnicities.
Like,
Yes, what was that?
Darby said like equal, but I think it's equal but separate.
Yes, and it's like I don't think we talked about it in this class, but we have something called de facto and de jure, right? So de facto is something that is happening by the people. De jure is the government. So de facto would be, okay, I'm allowed to do what I want, all right? I'm allowed to be integrated, but at the same time, that's whatever. Like, I don't want to be with them. De jure is that the government makes you, or the government is racist, or the government is doing racist, or has racist acts against the people. Remember, technically in the United States, we are de jure. We don't have a racist government because we do have laws that protect against that. But the people, just because it's in the books doesn't mean the people can do that, correct? A person can still be racist, right? Even though he works for the United States government, correct? You can have a racist TSA person at the airport, correct? But technically he's not supposed to because it's government. Making
Like
sense?
Police officers too.
Exactly. The police officer, like when you go to Harahan, when you're out in New Orleans, you may have a racist police officer, correct? Because again, even though he's not supposed to be, your government can't change your brain, right? You can't brainwash them. Well, they happen in North Korea, but it doesn't happen here, right? You can't brainwash someone. Okay, so moving back to this, that was a really good segue though, Darby. I love that. All right, so we have the next thing I want you to write down is the Economic Opportunity Act. So we have the Great Society, you have the Civil Rights Act, and now we have economic, and I'm just going to put it on the board, EOA. The Economic Opportunity Act. Now, what LBJ was doing is this man, he really was super progressive. All of this ties into each other. So each of these tie into each other. And the Economic Opportunity Act was a way to actually get money to minorities. He was like, all right, we have problems in our society. We have problems. African Americans aren't making that much money. We need to make sure they get money. They are in poverty. We need to make sure we siphon money for them. We need to make them equal. So African Americans were here. We need to bring them up economically. If we want them to be equal in our society, we need to give them money. That's progressive thinking. All right, that's what we all should be thinking. However, it really didn't get too far, right? Like we just said, when you're in the South and one day you're told you're integrated, you can't be racist, that's not going to do much. And again, people misuse this money, and it really wasn't too good. Yes?
I had a question. So is this like the first time, or I guess it's introduced to us for like we come about, and I'm like lack of words, but like for instance, like we have like Medicaid and stuff like that. Like, is that like kind of like the first introduction to this?
Yes, that is exactly, you're kind of skipping ahead. That's exactly what happens. If actually I'm going to skip the 1964 election, actually Barry Goldwater is what Hillary Clinton worked for. She was a Republican in the 1960s. But there you go, Medicare and Medicaid. So he was ahead of us. LBJ actually introduced this. Yes?
This is where like 401ks coming from.
I actually don't know the answer to that one. I think that came out a little bit earlier, but I don't think, like, when you worked for a company, usually, like, back in the 1950s, you worked for a company for, like, the benefits, not really for the paycheck, but the benefits came in, like, vacation. It kind of came in the form of, like, early retirement, which was, like, but the company collected that for you. By the 1960s, 401ks were pretty important. But,
Can you explain to me what 401k?
not right now, because I need to look up, I need to research it a little bit better, because I am, like, I have one, and I have no clue where it goes. That's really sad. What? But we'll discuss that later, because that is something I have to research, and I know nothing about. So anyway, So Medicare and Medicaid, this is healthcare. Again, they are very confusing. Okay, so I would just make sure, don't listen to me, I would make sure you copy it from the board. Alright, so when you're older you get Medicare, and if you need money, or if you don't have enough money, you get Medicaid. Alright, now we get this because during this time a lot of older Americans were not able to go to the doctor. But at the same time, you also have people that didn't make enough money to go to the doctor. So we created this system, all right, which is somewhat flawed, okay? We created a system that is somewhat flawed. Remember, we spoke about Canada, we spoke about France, we spoke about the UK. All of these have universal health care. The United States never took that step, and we see that here. LBJ thought he was doing a good job with this, all right? And this is where, to this day, politicians still fight over this, right? Some politicians, Republican politicians on one side think that we take too much money out for these programs, and at the same time, we have Democrats that say we take too much or we don't give enough into it. So you have this double, like, again, it's really hard. Just the other day, actually, a modern day implication of this is Bernie Sanders was at a town hall meeting, and he was actually on Fox News. It was broadcasted on Fox News, which is a very conservative station, but they asked the audience, do you think that, he said, who in here gets health care from their employer? And everybody raised their hand, including Bernie. Then afterwards, they said, who would want a one system health care paid for by the government? And everyone raised their hands. It was huge cheering. But again, at a town hall meeting, don't you think it's going to be kind of biased? Like, you want to hear Bernie, correct? There's a lot of people that would fight to go hear Bernie, correct? Especially on college campuses. Yes?
Okay, so why don't we have universal health care?
It was a choice that we made back in the 1960s. Okay, because you know what was happening in the UK is that the UK gave the government or gave the people health care. We gave the people. Okay, we were able to, like, they gave them universal health care in the UK, and the US was like, okay, we can't be outdone with that. So we introduced this system. But remember, we had very conservative people in the government who didn't want to just give out money, because to them that was giving away money, right? That's how I hard-earned money. But at the same time, I think this was the best, I would say the best agreement we could come across. Because in the UK, that was a gift to the people because they had fought in World War I and World War II, and they were devastated. For us, this was like, we never went through that tragedy, so I think this is the best compromise we could come out to.
Wouldn't it like kill people faster and make them work faster?
Yeah, and that is, again, that's another side of the story, but again, it all comes back down to money. All right, as my mom always say, it comes back down to the dollar. If you don't want to give away, if I make a lot of money, I don't want to give like most of my paycheck away to that. But at the same time, like, if I'm not a sick person, I don't want to give away money for that. If I'm sick, I would want it. And so it's like this constant battle in government. Again, you should know when we get to our next chapter, this comes back into play. This will never, and all the slideshows that we do, this never goes away. This is a consistent issue with the United States. Now, in the U.S. government, we're debating if abortion is okay with this. Like, or would that be paid for? Okay, if you were older, I don't think you really need it. But again, like, you're not, this is something like, okay, can the government, like, if you have a government healthcare system, can or would abortion be paid for by the government? And that's something a lot of Americans really can't stand. Like, we can't have that. So, this is going to be our last slide, and we're going to move into our guided practice. I want you to write down the Immigration Act of 1965. This is our international, so immigration of 1965. So not only does LBJ have to deal with the Vietnam War, not only does he have to deal with Great Society, the Civil Rights, Economic Opportunity Act, but now he limited immigration. Remember how long we have been speaking about how immigration is always an issue in the U.S.? I'll have this question in class. When was the first time the United States really, when was that first time the United States really didn't like immigration? What was that? Does anybody remember the act that we created?
World War II.
No, much earlier than World War II.
When we blocked Chinese people from coming to America.
Beautiful. Earlier, but there's one earlier one. If you remember, that's the earliest so far.
Irish people not coming in?
Yes, when was that?
Like in the 1800s, 70s?
Yes, very, very close. 1820s. You were close too. That was 1830s or 40s. 1820s. The first time that we limited immigration was 1820 with Irish people. then we move on to Chinese, then we move on to Hispanics, then we move on to, again, another immigrant group. Now, in the 1860s, we have another issue. The issue is we limit non-Western Europeans, only non-Western Europeans. What's the problem with that?
Czechoslovakia.
No, what's the problem?
It can't do more services that we don't want to do.
So Colin got it for you, but it's a little discrimination, right? So first off, we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which allows everyone, right, to be treated equally. But now we create this act here that only allows, that only limits non-Western Europeans. So how would that play a part? Yes, Austin.
What would they consider like that borderline of west and east?
Very good question. Does anybody want to answer that? Jeremiah.
Oh,
Okay.
white people.
Yes, but what type of white people?
Just the white people.
But
Europe?
right? But what type of Europeans? Like
Russian.
you
Up to Germany.
Okay, so West. Remember that iron wall we talked about?
The Berlin
Oh,
Wall?
yeah.
Yes. So this is where the Cold War, guys. This is where the Cold War comes into play. Please have this in, and I'll get to your question, right? The problem was we didn't want Russians or Eastern Europeans to come into the United States, and of course some other people from South America and Africa. We were afraid of communism. We were afraid that if we let in people, like if we let in too many people from Eastern Europe and Russia, then we would become communists, because then we would let in communists.
So when you say Eastern Europe, like all those Russian states that
Yes. Right here, here's the line. We let in like Austria, like just to cut off Austria, but this country here, everything past that, it's like, oof, gotta get a visa. Yes.
So if during this time, with the equality, how could they like do that? Like who decided to make that a thing?
So that's when, like, you know when you're blinded, you know when you're like really sick? Don't you like when you do, like you're really, really sick and you make really weird decisions, you get those really weird dreams, and it makes sense at the time. Does anybody have that, like when you have like, it's called like the flu dream, right? And in that dream, it makes so much sense to like punch a 7th grader or something. Like that just made sense in your dream.
I did
No
stupid
one-
stuff when I got my wisdom teeth taken out.
Right, okay, so like when you're like, again, no one had those dreams, like where again, like you have those really weird dreams where you're flying, and that just makes sense in that dream.
I had a dream that my dad was telling me to do my homework, and I woke up and I was like, homework.
Right, no, I don't know more. Okay, so no one gets that reference, but anyway, what I'm saying is, for some reason in Europe, or in the United States at this time, we were like, okay, this, of course, this is discrimination, we need to end it. But then once we get to like, to only letting in certain people, we didn't think that was discrimination. Because again, we didn't want to see it as discrimination. We saw it, and again, we do this a lot in the US, we see it as, guys, we see that as protection, okay? And that's what you need to know. We were protecting ourselves from the Cold War. Please note that this got Russia infuriated, in a sense. Russia was not happy with this because they knew that we were targeting them. We were targeting Russia. This flared up the Cold War. This actually got some people really, really mad.
It was kind of under the table.
Very under the table. Very under the table. Now, since we only have a few minutes left, we're going to go into the guided practice, okay? So make sure you open up to a new, please have a new page in your notebook or Chromebook. Let's see if my computer will cooperate. Here we go. So I have 2 questions for it, and we're going to like work on it. It's kind of like our essay prep.
You want to write them down?
Yes, please. I will have it. So I'm going to leave this up here just to kind of help us out. If it loads. It's loading. It's not loading. Okay. Anyway, so I can also say I'm out too. I have them 2 places. I'm so
You want
prepared.
us to write the question down?
Yes, once it pops up, once it decides. Let's see if I... here we go. All right. So, I'm throwing a curveball at you. Okay? So it says, have women's lives changed for the better because of the Civil Rights Act of 1965? Already there's a mistake. Well, no, actually, no. I'm actually correct. So anyway, have women's lives changed for the better because of the Civil Rights Act of 1965? I will give you a minute to write this down, to think about it. We haven't spoken about women, you are right, but remember, it's against all from what we learned previously. Okay. So, does anybody want to answer this first? So again, remember this is a paragraph / short answer, kind of looking for 3 to 4 sentences here. Have women's lives changed for the better because of the Civil Rights Act of 1965? Anybody want to try? Who wants to try? Remember this. Yes.
I don't know. I feel like it does. Like it changes their lives because during the Civil Rights Act, like you're really still unsure of how America's going to react to certain things.
Right.
So it allows women to open up and I guess express themselves more because back then during war and stuff, women were really just sheltered in houses and all
Right.
and couldn't really express themselves. So
Correct.
I feel like this just like lets them open up to the world and give a new stance.
Okay. That's awesome. So it is like, so first off we have expression. Correct. What else? Yes, Kate, do you have an answer to throw in there?
I was gonna say, like, when women got rights of the leaders, only like white women, other minority women still got discriminated against, but now it opens up for all of them.
Beautiful. Yes. No? Okay. Anybody else? That was awesome answer. Yes, Valerie.
So like, since the civil rights movement was happening, it was like surrounded by like everybody wanting equality. So I feel like women kind of were like, oh, if everyone else is getting these rights, then
We
why
want-
shouldn't we?
I want it too, right?
Yeah.
Like again, if I'm only gonna give ice cream to Felipe, right? And like, or just to like this row, everybody be like, I want it too. Like, why? What makes them so special? And I'll be like, well, you don't play guitar, right? And everybody be like, well, right? Were you at worship service yesterday? But what we're seeing here is that again, because one minority group got rights, everyone else is getting minority groups right. What I would do in an ideal situation, I would start off with life before 1965 for women, and then move on. You have all used your critical thinking skills to kind of answer this one. All right? What I would write down to improve on your answer if you haven't done so, remember, you're thinking about life before. You are talking about what life would be in the middle. At the end, remember, I think I'm going with Cade's answer. And Cade's answer, again, at the end would be saying, like, maybe, like, again, maybe it wouldn't be the same for all people, right? Like, maybe we're still not treating women correctly. Yes?
Okay, so what you just said, I feel like that women, their lives, they could change for the better, but not like, they still get treated as a minority.
Yes.
There still is like a pay wage gap in certain jobs. I mean, not certain jobs, but like all of jobs. It's like a big
Yes.
pay wage gap.
70, I think it's 75 cents to every male dollar.
Yeah.
Like, again, I'm in a privileged situation because I am male and white. So, I am male and I'm white, and I'm also, like, again, I'm not affected by that. So, again, think about being in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Being in the 1960s, you have men here, they don't see it. They're not like, oh, well, I'm doing a great justice. Yes, Darby.
Isn't that why like they give like certain scholarships to women going into certain fields, like the medical field and stuff, because they're looking for like female like radiologists, like female and stuff like that, because like men are like dominate the field so much.
Yes, men have dominated the field, in, like, especially in the STEM. It's a lot of white men. Yes.
Like, it may be bad for like white women, but it's worse for minorities, like
Yes.
blacks and I don't know.
Well, especially in, I would say the STEM, because I had, when I was in college, I went to school with one girl. She was the only African American woman in the field, and the other students didn't like her. From what she told me. Now, granted, y'all know I can't get into a math class, so again, I wasn't able to do. Yes.
Question: is that like why, like when they do road work or construction, they always have men working on the sign and not like?
I mean, it could
Notice
be.
that?
I always notice that. I have seen gender, like different genders on signs, but I only saw that up north. Just think about here. That is actually a really good question. Again, it's always men at work on the signs, never women at work, or just people, never people at work, right? It's always men at work. Right now they're saying that's like, I'm pretty sure they're going to say, oh no, it's less money to put men on it because it's shorter. So that's kind of an excuse. All right, I'm going to quickly go through the second